However you kind of engage best is totally fine with me. So let me see if I can get my Zoom box situated in the right place so I can see everybody too. Okay, awesome. Perfect. So let me see here. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about the Clifton Strengths today. And basically, the concept, big picture behind the Clifton Strengths are this idea that if we focus on our natural talents and what we are already good at, we're going to be able to maximize our potential a lot more than if we're focusing on our weaknesses or what we're bad at. So I think it's a really helpful way you can apply yourself, both in the classroom, but also as many of you may be starting to apply for jobs in the field. I think that the Clifton Strengths gives you a really good framework for which to share information about yourself through interviews and networking and opportunities like that. Um, because who has been asked before, like, what are your strengths in an interview? Anybody been asked that? What are your top strengths? It's a pretty common question and sometimes one that's a little bit tricky to answer. So I think this kind of gives you some insight into that. Let me pull up the chat box too. Okay, yeah, got a couple of people saying yes. Cool. So more about me. I'm Jocelyn. I've been working in career services at the college for about 2.5 years as a career coordinator. My top 5 strengths are individualization, relator, communication, empathy, and connectedness. And so you'll learn more about kind of what that means as we go through the presentation today. And many of you have taken the assessment already and might have an insight of what your strengths are too. But important to know about me is that 4 out of my top 5 are in relationship building. So that means that I really care a lot about people. I'm energized when I get to do presentations and meet with students one-on-one and be communicating and building connections with others. So that's kind of how my strengths are showing up for me. And I'll share some more kind of stories and things like that as we go through too. So first, I want to know a little bit more about who's in the room. So if you want to put in the chat your name, and then it doesn't have to be one of your strengths from your assessment results, but it can be if you want. Just share one positive word that people use to describe you. You can also unmute yourself and say it out loud if you prefer to do it that way. Learner, creative, adaptable. I love it. I'll give another minute or so if folks are still thinking. I put you on the spot. Oh, and I love seeing a cat. That's always positive. Hi, Matt. Matt, what's your cat's name?
You're muted, Matt. Oh, there we go.
The space bar wasn't working. This one's called Nova.
Nova. Nice.
She's our rescue.
Very
Somebody a couple years ago threw her out of a car in the middle of a rainstorm in like November, and my son brought her home from his work and said, "Hey, want to see what it would take to take her to the shelter?" And I was like, "Oh no, she's not going anywhere."
cool.
So she's
Oh,
one of our rescues. She's the only female of the cats, and she's very dominating.
very sweet. Well, I'm glad you rescued her. I have a cat that I got from an adoption place too. So very nice. All right, cool. What else we got in the chat? We got focused. We got trustworthy, creative, creative. Cool. I like that a lot of you are saying creative. That kind of tracks that you're in graphic design, right? Um, yeah, the reason I want you to start thinking about how people positively describe you is because that's kind of the whole point of the strengths, right? Is to think about ourselves in a positive light. Usually when you do your coaching sessions with us or when you um, come for these workshops, you should leave feeling kind of like warm and fuzzy. Like we just talked about stuff that you were good at and ways that you should feel good about yourself. So that's kind of like the tone I want to set. But awesome. Love all the words you use to describe yourselves. Okay, so a little bit of kind of like factoids about the strengths before we get into how you all are applying them. Um, Generally, Gallup has found, and Gallup is kind of the issuer of the strengths assessment, and they're also a really big research firm. So you might have seen them in the news before because they do surveys of the public on various topics. People who use their strengths every day at work are reported as 3 times more likely to have an excellent quality of life and 6 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. So the reason for this, I mean, there are many, but has anybody ever been in a position before where you just kind of felt like checked out? You didn't feel like you were being utilized. Maybe you were expected to do things that were not, um, were kind of lower than your skill set. See Rachel saying for sure. Yep, Sam saying yes. Um, I'll share a brief example about me. So my last job, I worked at a nonprofit in the Twin Cities in a communications role. And you all saw communication is one of my top 5. So I wasn't totally outside my strengths. But I was actually doing like some graphic design, which I was not qualified for. All of you would be way better than me. I was writing copy for the website. I was producing videos, doing those types of things. And I just felt like I was really burned out. Like I didn't feel like I was being utilized. I felt like I was spending most of my day in my office by myself. I was never talking to people. I was never really interacting. I was just working independently. And of course, I could do it, but I just felt like something was missing, right? And so in that role, actually, we all took the Clifton Strengths assessment as a team, and I got my results that said, "Wow, like 4 out of 5 of my top strengths are in that relationship building category." And it was at that time that I realized, like, maybe that's why I'm not happy, right? Like, I feel like every day I'm coming to work, I'm able to do my job, but I'm just not feeling satisfied and I'm not feeling engaged because I'm not able to communicate with people every day. I'm not able to build relationships and connect. So ended up applying for this job at the college. And now, like 80 to 90% of my job is one-on-one appointments with students. It's doing these workshops. It's connecting with people and communicating and collaborating on projects. And I found myself to be a lot happier. So that's kind of one example of how taking this can make you think a little bit more critically about what you're being asked to do at your job and what your strengths are and where there may be mismatch. So also as you're maybe looking for jobs in the graphic design field, be thinking about like what's your balance, right? Like, do you want to be working with people a lot? Do you want to do more independent tasks? Do you, really enjoy like having a list of things that you can check off throughout the day, or do you want more flexibility and ability to do things when you want them and how you want them? So as Sam put in the chat, you can do like a deep dive into your Clifton strengths with us. And those are some of the things we can talk about together of like, how can you advocate for yourself to use your strengths in your career? And then also just kind of like in your school life and your personal life as well. All right, my next slide here. So yeah, people who are getting to work in their strength zone more often, they look forward to going to work. They have more positive versus negative interactions with their coworkers. They treat people better. They tell their friends they work for a great company. They achieve more on a daily basis and they have more positive, creative, and innovative moments. So really all of this just goes to show that like the research backs it up. If you're working on the things you're good at all the time, you're gonna be happier. And that's not to say we don't need to think about our weaknesses a little bit and manage around those too. But it's really just to say that when we are given the opportunity to really thrive and feel like challenged and like we're setting goals and growing within our own skill set, we're going to be a lot happier. Okay, so next I have a little activity for us. So feel free to either like put a thumbs up, like either give me a thumbs up like this or raise your hand, put in the chat, however you'd like. I got a couple different questions for you. So the first one is, do you almost always talk to people in elevators, airplanes, grocery stores, and wherever you go? Yes or no?
Not always.
Not always. Say more. If you don't do it always, when do you do it versus when do you not do it?
I mean, it depends. I mean, if they start talking, you can respond at the grocery store or even in the airplanes. Sometimes it's just quiet,
For sure.
not saying anything.
Yeah, so you kind of let those other people take the lead, and then if you're not going to ignore them if they start talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm seeing, yeah, some people say yes, some people say no. So if you're somebody who finds it pretty easy to strike up a conversation with a stranger, then you probably have one of those relationship building skills. Um, you might find it really easy to connect with people. You can easily start a conversation, and that's something that not everybody can do. So even though some of us, might find those people who talk to us on the streets or in the elevator like a little bit annoying even sometimes, it actually is a strength, right? Like that ability to create rapport with somebody and connect is something that can serve you in life. All right, the next question is, do you almost always have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet? Yes or no? Being a big yes, mostly yes, halfway. I might be halfway too. Like I'm kind of organized, but then if I've worn something once, but I don't think it's dirty, then I'll make like multiple piles of clothes that I think I'm going to get back to, but then end up just cluttering up my whole room. Organized by type, yes, 50-50. Like it organized. Awesome. Does anybody want to tell me more about their organizational system?
Mine tends to be very kind of more militaristic. It's left to right, lighter shirts to heavier, like sweaters and sweatshirts, coats, and then organized by color from there. It's not super organized right now because we're redoing a bunch of stuff, but it's that's kind of the pattern I go by. My wife hates it. She just crams. I hate that.
I'm more of a crammer myself as well, but I hate that about myself. So, but it makes sense that a lot of you are saying you sort it by type. I mean, I feel like especially in Minnesota where we have the four seasons, it kind of makes sense that you'd want your closet organized by like temperature almost. Like today, I'm like doubled up and like wearing multiple shirts because it's so cold. Um, okay, cool. Anybody else have an organizational method they use?
Yeah, I also like organize by type. And for example, I have two kids, and I like to have like a place for each of the, the things. So like for their socks or their t-shirts. So I have a drawer for each of them as well as mine. And so that's I think it's always for me good to know when which of all of the things belong to, and then I have to put them there. So it's like they have a place to go. Because if I don't have a place for them to go, it's just like it will be a mess.
Yes. I'm sure that like you have to do that, right? Just to save yourself time and energy. So because you're like go, go, go and got to be ready for whatever. Kids' closets organized, but maybe less so for you. That makes sense too. Yeah, my mom was that type too. She was always like, everything has to have a place. And if it doesn't have a place, then we're getting rid of it. And she's still that way. So, but that didn't rub off on me. So what we can learn from this is some people are kind of naturally inclined to be more organized than other people. With all these strengths and all these skills, there's not like, values or morals attached, right? Like it's not a bad thing if you're a crammer versus an organizer. But it's interesting how like these things that we take for granted about ourselves can be kind of like bigger picture, right? So somebody who maybe organizes their closet is somebody who's a strategic thinker, somebody who is able to like focus in and get stuff done. Discipline is one of the strengths. Maybe it's somebody who's disciplined and like, instead of being like me and doing the laundry and then leaving it in the baskets, like digging through it, you probably fold it and put it away. I love that for you. Work life and personal life personalities being divided? I think they can be. I mean, it's more advantageous to you to be organized at work, right? Because you're being paid. If somebody paid me to do my laundry, then maybe I would be more motivated to do that too. But I would say that's the case with me as well. And maybe probably some of you feel that way where like when you're with your schoolwork and with your work, you're like pretty organized and disciplined, but then maybe like at home a little bit more cluttered. For sure. Okay, the next one is, do you almost always write down a list of things to do and stick to it even on the weekend? Nope. Big lists. Okay, Tony does some lists. Maybe more fluid lists, like maybe you make the list, but you don't stick to it.
It's
Haha.
gonna be so fascinating when they reveal their Clifton strengths because it's like we're really getting to know each other, and then all of a sudden it'll be cool to see how that tracks.
Exactly. Exactly. A list that's not followed. Yeah, I feel that. I'm always writing lists and then I never look at them again. Yes or
I
no.
always end up I always end up losing my list or something, and it's like I've just learned to kind of keep the list in my head and check it off as I go. So it's like I kind of make a list, but it stays in my head. It doesn't get written down.
Mm-hmm. Sam said the cat ate your list. That could be. I know my cat's always eating my mail, so if I had a list, she'd probably eat it too. Okay, cool. Yeah, planning ahead for activities. So yeah, again, coming up where like maybe some people are a little bit different in their work or academic life versus their personal life, which is interesting to note too. All right, let's go to this next one. Do you almost always need to pick someone to race while driving?
Are you talking like race, like down the road, like trying to get ahead of them, or
Yeah. Yeah, like
okay?
maybe you're on
That's
a car ride on the highway and you're like, oh, I just want to get to my destination before that person gets to theirs.
it's kind of funny you say that because I live in Brainerd. So I used to work in Fridley. I worked and I commuted back and forth when I lived in Little Falls every day for like a year and a half. And it's like there is some, it's stereotypical, and I hate to use it sometimes, but Minneapolis drivers coming up north, you can always tell the Minneapolis drivers because they cluster. They go in like clusters of like about 7 cars, and they're all trying to pass each other. And then about 3 miles ahead, there's another cluster. It's like I just stay at a very steady pace and I would just drive past them, but I meet these clusters and they're all fighting for that little first place position or whatever. So it's kind of funny.
That is interesting. Very interesting. I know a lot of people in the chat are saying, um, no, they don't do that. Watch people and then laugh when you arrive at the same place at the same time. Let them pass. It's a nice drive. Okay, good. I'm in good company because when I first read this, I was like, people do that? Like, you're driving like a 2-ton machine that could like hurt somebody. Like, why are you racing? But I did have a coworker in career services a couple of years ago, and we were on our way to like a team retreat that we were doing off campus at the end of the semester. And we were going to like, I was in a car and then she was in the other car. And we saw her like peel out in her minivan, which is like all scraped up because she's hit so many things before. And those parking spots that have like the concrete like at the front of it, like it's like a little like curb almost at the front of the parking spot. She just like threw it into drive and drove right over the top of the concrete parking spot and peeled out. So I know she was like that. And I think, what Gallup's point is people like this, maybe they have competition in their top five, or maybe competition is a strength that's important to them. And competition could be with other people. It could also just be with yourself. And so that can motivate people to do better and do more. But yeah, with the driving, kind of scary to me. All right. Next one we have is, do you almost always tend to ask too many questions? Seeing some yes, a no, yes. Sometimes. Okay, pretty mixed on this one. You could say that, like, yeah, there's never too many questions, right? I think questions are generally good. Maybe not if you ask the same question like 5, 6 times, but the first time a question is generally a good thing. Um, but yeah, that might mean that you're somebody who is, again, like a strategic thinker. Maybe you like learning, you're always curious, you want to know the context for things. Um, yeah. Okay, this is our last one. So the last one is, do you almost always push the elevator button to remind the elevator that you're there? So you know it's already lit up, but it's just not going fast enough for you. You're like pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. Okay, some no people. A lot of people said no. Okay, so I'm this way sometimes. I walk most places, and especially with like the crosswalk, where it says like walk, walk, or like wait or whatever. Like I'm always like pushing it, like I want to walk across the street. But yeah, you could frame this as impatient, but you could also frame it as like you're just like ready to get going, right? Like there's one strength called activator that's all about like when you're faced with a situation, you feel like you're like eager to just like get started and jump in and go. So I think that's a positive thing. It can be a positive thing too. Key thing about all of these is that even though they seem, like I said, pretty just like quirky things that we naturally do, you can make some extrapolations out and see like how your personality or your strengths shine through, even in, pushing the elevator button or racing a car or organizing your closet. Because our talents are just these themes that are recurring. A lot of the talents you might have seen even when you were a kid, like some like little remnants of this talent that you have. Um, and so, yeah, some examples would be that effortlessly starting conversations, thinking orderly and timely, naturally having an influence over other people, recognizing patterns, having a positive outlook on life. There's like lots of different ways that we contribute to our teams and to the people in our lives. And so basically now that you have taken your strengths assessment, we're going to start thinking about how we can identify ways that some of you have done that too. Okay, keep losing my mouse. Okay, so again, this basically just saying you're going to be more productive and more profitable if you're using your strengths. Gallup provides a lot of this research to big like Fortune 500 corporations and companies where you might have to make more of the case that like focusing on strengths is important for business models. So this is just again like another interesting fact and tidbit. Okay, so now I've got another activity for you. Don't start yet. Okay, so hopefully, does everybody have access to paper and something to write with? It can just be like a scratch paper. But try and locate paper and something to write with, and then kind of give me an indicator when you've got that.
Will notepad work?
Yep.
Just on a computer?
Yep. Anything that you could like write. Ideally, it would be like writing by hand. So if you can do that, that would be great. But if it's typing, then I think there's a way you could make that work too. All right, so kind of give me a little nod or a thumbs up when you've got your paper. Okay, perfect. We'll wait for Tony for a second. I'll do it too. Yes, pencil tool would count. Okay, cool. So again, don't start yet, but here's the instructions. So we're gonna have a race, and I know nobody said they're competitive, but try and channel your competitive energy for a minute. We're gonna see who can do this the fastest. So what you're gonna do is write the following phrase 3 times. I use my strengths every day. You're gonna do it as fast as you can, and then I'll be timing us. And then when you're done, like give me a wave or a thumbs up or something, and maybe there's gonna be a prize for the person who wins. So don't do anything yet. I'm gonna count it down. Is everybody ready? Okay. Everybody can start in 3, 2. Okay, wait. Switch your pen to your opposite hand. Okay, is everybody ready? All right, Three, two, one, go. Okay, why is this phrase so long? I'm trying to write it too. It's taking forever.
So you said it's left-handed?
Yes, or with your non-dominant hand. And then give me a wave when you're done. Oh my goodness. Okay, always done. Okay, Chris is done. It's not legible though. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So how was that for everybody?
So I'm right-handed. My family's normally right-handed. My oldest son is left-handed. So in order to teach him anything, I had to learn to do left-handed. Not super fast at it, not super good at it, not super legible, but it's not uncomfortable.
Okay, not uncomfortable. I like it. So some people say difficult, illegible, rough. You said maybe it takes you a little bit longer, but it's doable. Anybody else? Any reflections or thoughts?
Yeah, it was hard for me to switch between my overhands and then um, have a control of what I was trying to write down because I was like switching the letters backwards. I was at the S is like this, but I was writing it the other way with this hand, so it was hard.
Yeah, yeah, it's really hard. I know mine was like really bad too. It like started out okay and then it just got worse and worse and worse as it went on. Okay, cool. Now we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna do use your dominant hand or the hand you would normally write with. All right. Three, two, one, go. Okay. Always done. Chris is done. LM's done. Tony's done. Rachel's done. Awesome. Well, I guess that definitely went quicker. How did that compare? How did that feel for people?
Competitive.
More competitive? It felt better. Maybe it felt easier, kind of more natural. Maybe like you didn't even have to look at your paper as much as with your other hand. You could just kind of do it. Um, okay, cool. Well, there was a purpose to the activity. It wasn't just so I could see all of your bad handwriting. But this is kind of like a metaphor for what it's like when we're using our strengths versus when we're maybe not using our strengths, right? When we aren't using our strengths, it's kind of like I mentioned with my other job, right? Like I was able to do it, just like I'm able to write with my left hand. It works, it happened, but maybe it was a little bit harder. It felt a little unnatural. It felt rough. But then, when you are operating in your strengths, it might feel a little bit easier. It might feel more natural. It might make you feel better, more accomplished, more able to thrive. So it's just kind of like a fun little activity to break up the presentation. But I usually think about that um, when I'm using my strengths or when I'm not. When something feels hard, I'm thinking about like, okay, why does it feel hard? And how could I maybe try and apply some of my strengths in a way to make it feel less hard? Um, Little inspirational quote. What would happen if we study what was right with people versus what's wrong with people? Again, it's like a lot of times we're wired, right, to be focusing on our weaknesses or our perceived things we're lacking. And even like sometimes in performance reviews and grade reports and critiques and things like that, like we're thinking about the negative a lot more than the positive. But again, like flipping that around and using positive psychology to think about ourselves in a nice positive light can help us feel more accomplished, feel more fulfilled. Okay. So again, yes, there's nothing wrong with being aware of your weaknesses and managing them. And a lot of times some of our strengths might, or some of our weaknesses might just be our strengths turned up a notch too high too. A lot of these top five, there's going to be really positive things about them, but there might also be like some negative things about having those as strengths too. I mean, think about the person who's competitively driving their car, right? Like maybe that's going to drive them and motivate them to be better, but maybe that's not the best habit if you want to be safe and encourage safety for other people as well. So yeah, we're going to start now kind of turning it around on you all and thinking more about your strengths. If you do have your report from the assessment that you took, it would be helpful to maybe have that out just so you can kind of look at it for the next part. And then we're going to watch a quick video. I think it's like 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm going to make it so I can share the video.